16 people are dead, 24 are missing and at least 300 are trapped in mudslides which have torn the wealthy town of Montecito apart. The death toll climbed on Wednesday as emergency workers pulled bodies from a river of knee-deep mud and boulders which rained down on homes after a torrent of rain earlier in the week. The debris was able to rush down onto the community because the hillside vegetation which would have ordinarily impeded it was stripped during the catastrophic wildfires last month. Many residents put themselves in danger by not heeding mandatory and voluntary evacuation orders issued while there was still time to escape. Emergency services attributed the decision to evacuation fatigue after last month's wildfires which drove hundreds of thousands from their homes. As more unthinkable damage rocked the area, celebrities were among those who found themselves caught up in the chaos. Oprah Winfrey's $50 million home survived the damage and she was not home for the worst of it, but she visited the site on Tuesday to share her shock and grief. Tennis star Jimmy Connors revealed to fans that he had to be airlifted out of his home to safety. As they surveyed the damage, 300 people remain trapped in the hillside community of Romero Canyon, which has become impassable. Authorities are working on an evacuation plan to airlift the hundreds of stranded residents to safety. Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown said on Wednesday that his officers still did not know how many were trapped. "We don't know how many people are still trapped. We know there are some. We are still making our way into certain areas of Montecito and the adjacent areas to determine if anyone is still there and still alive," he told CBS. The first victims have been identified. They include fathers and husbands whose wives and children were rescued but they were swept away. Among the missing are sisters Morgan Corey, 25, and Sawyer Corey, 12, who were asleep in their home when the mudslides hit. The miraculous rescue of teenager Lauren Canton, who was pulled from her crumpled home when firefighters heard her screaming, was crushed by the devastating news that her father, Dave, had been killed. As the scale of the damage begins to emerge, questions persist over why so many died in the devastation. Part of the answer lies in what emergency services have called evacuation fatigue, a complacency or refusal to heed their warnings after last month's catastrophic fires. NBC cited officials who said they were worried residents would not take the mudslides as seriously and not leave. Bridget Bottoms, a resident who chose to stay at home, appeared to confirm their fears, telling the Los Angeles Times, "It sounds foolish but it's like, how bad can it get?" Sheriff Brown confirmed on Wednesday that there were some who chose to stay behind despite warnings. There were some people who did refuse to evacuate and chose to stay in their homes, but there were many that did evacuate and they were safe because of that, he said. About 7,000 residents in Santa Barbara County were ordered to evacuate before the downpour on Tuesday, and another 23,000 were urged to do so voluntarily, but many remained. Winfrey shared video of her home following the floods to let her followers know she was safe and her $50 million home had survived the storm. She stood in knee-deep mud and debris as she said a fence had been knocked down and that she was devastated over the damage to her neighbor's house. "Thanks everyone for your prayers and concern," she said in the caption. "My property is fine, some mud, and minor damage that pales in comparison to what my neighbors are going through." Winfrey previously shared a number of videos on Instagram showing the knee-deep mud in her yard, a gas fire nearby and helicopters rescuing her neighbors. "What a day," she said on the social media site as she filmed from her $50 million estate in Montecito. "Praying for our community again in Santa Barbara. Woke up to this blazing gas fire, then swipe left to see how deep the mud is in my backyard. Helicopters rescuing my neighbors. Looking for missing persons." Former tennis star Connors told his Twitter followers that he had to be evacuated from his home by helicopter. Montecito, fires burn, rain comes, mudslides and devastation, evacuated today by helicopter, thoughts and prayers for all, he wrote. Connors has owned an 800-square-foot home in the neighborhood since 2001. The upscale communities of Montecito and Carpinteria, just outside the city of Santa Barbara, were hardest hit. Over the past month, California's scenic coastline was ravaged by a series of intense wildfires that burned off vegetation. Mudslides slammed into homes, covered highways and swept away vehicles early on Tuesday when more than a half-inch, 1.5 cm, of rain fell in 5 minutes, a rate that far exceeds the normal flash flood threshold. Officials said during a press conference that the death toll was 15. Santa Barbara County CEO Mona Miyasato emailed her staff to say the number had increased to 16. The Santa Barbara Independent reported. The first confirmed death was Roy Rhoda, a former real estate broker who founded St. Augustine Academy in Ventura. The Catholic school's headmaster, Michael Van Heck, announced the death and said Rhoda's wife was injured by the mudslide. At least 25 people were injured in the mudslides and at least 24 others were unaccounted for as of Wednesday. On Tuesday, emergency workers using search dogs and helicopters to rescue dozens of people stranded in mud-coated rubble in the normally pristine area, sandwiched between the ocean and the sprawling Los Padres National Forest, about 110 miles, 180 km, north of Los Angeles. Among those missing following the mudslides are sisters Morgan Corey, 25, and Sawyer Corey, 12. They were asleep in their home with Sawyer's twin sister, Summer, and their mother, Carrie Baker, when the mudslide hit early Tuesday morning. Baker and Summer Corey were later found by rescue teams and taken to hospital in critical condition. Friends and family have launched a social media search for Sawyer and Morgan, whose whereabouts are still unknown. Also missing are elderly couple Alice and Jim Mitchell. Family members are hoping to find them at an evacuation center, but they have not heard from the couple since the mudslide hit. Father of 6 John McManigal, who was swept out of his home by flooding alongside his 23-year-old son, Connor, who was later found. My father is being reported as missing right now, John's son, Tyler, who is stationed in Hawaii for the Navy, told the Los Angeles Times. The 28-year-old added, "They found my brother probably 3/4 of a mile away, south of where the house is, on the 101 freeway." Rescue crews used helicopters to pluck more than 50 people from rooftops because trees and power lines blocked roads. Dozens more were rescued on the ground and firefighters pulled mudcaked 14-year-old Lauren Cantin from a collapsed Montecito home where she had been trapped for hours. "I thought I was dead for a minute there," the girl could be heard saying on video posted by KNBC-TV before she was taken away on a stretcher. Lauren's father, Dave Cantin, and brother, Jack, were said to be missing after the rescue. Andy Rupp, Montecito Fire Department told NBC News, "As we came off this debris pile in the back, my partner and I were able to hear a little bit of a scream, so we got real quiet. We were able to locate the victim and over the last 6 hours we've been locating exactly where she was, digging down to her. With the help of a lot of tools we were able to free her out and she's on her way into the hospital right now." Elsewhere in Montecito, a man dug a baby out of 4 feet of mud after hearing crying coming from the neighbor's house. Berkeley Johnson and his wife, Karen, had climbed to their roof around 3 a.m. on Tuesday after mud and boulders crashed into their home. After the flooding receded, Johnson heard the cries from the neighbor's house, so he jumped into action and dug for feet through the mud to find the child, who was under a pile of rocks. "It remains unclear who that child belonged to. We don't know where it came from but we got it out, got the mud out of its mouth. I hope it's okay. I'm glad we got it out but who knows what else is out there," he told KSBY, holding back tears. Karen Johnson said that she and Berkeley were rescued by fire officials after climbing onto the roof of their neighbor's garage. The baby was taken to a local hospital for treatment. Also rescued is a family of 5 in distress in Carpinteria. A U.S. Coast Guard crew from San Diego rescued the family, a mother, father, a newborn baby, a 7-year-old boy and 3-year-old daughter, as well as their 2 dogs on Tuesday. The first floor of the family's home was filled with 4 feet of mud, so the family was airlifted from the roof. The death toll could increase when the searches deepened and expanded Wednesday, with a major search and rescue team arriving from nearby Los Angeles County and help from the Coast Guard and National Guard along with law enforcement. They'll focus first on finding survivors. Right now our assets are focused on determining if anyone is still alive in any of those structures that have been damaged, Santa Barbara County Sheriff Bill Brown said. The sheriff said at least several dozen homes that have been either destroyed or severely damaged, and likely many other ones are in areas that are as yet inaccessible. He said it's likely they'll find more people amid that destruction. Sheriff Bill Brown said that identities of those killed in the mudslides until family members had been notified. Rescue personnel in Santa Barbara County early on Wednesday morning continued searching for victims and the death toll could rise. While we hope it will not, we expect this number to increase as we continue to look for people who are missing and unaccounted for, Brown said. The mud was unleashed in the dead of night by flash flooding in the steep, fire-scarred Santa Ynez Mountains. Burned-over zones are especially susceptible to destructive mudslides because scorched earth does not absorb water well and the land is easily eroded when there are no shrubs. The torrent of mud early on Tuesday swept away cars and destroyed several homes, reducing them to piles of lumber. "I came around the house and heard a deep rumbling, an ominous sound I knew was boulders moving as the mud was rising," said Thomas Teig, who discovered 2 of his cars missing from the driveway in the middle of the night. "I saw 2 other vehicles moving slowly sideways down the middle of the street in a river of mud, in daylight." Mr. Tighe was shocked to see a body pinned by muck against his neighbor's home. Heavy downpours struck before dawn on Tuesday after 7,000 residents in Santa Barbara County were ordered to evacuate and another 23,000 were urged to do so voluntarily, some of them for a second time since December. The county set up an evacuation shelter at Santa Barbara City College, where some people showed up drenched in mud, and also provided a place for people to take their animals. Authorities had been bracing for the possibility of catastrophic flooding because of heavy rain in the forecast for the first time in 10 months. Evacuations were ordered near the recently burned areas of Santa Barbara, Ventura and Los Angeles counties, but only an estimated 10 to 15% of people in a mandatory evacuation area of Santa Barbara County heeded the warning, authorities said. Sheriff Bill Brown said that a number of deaths and rescue missions occurred in voluntary evacuation zones, where about 23,000 live. A 30-mile stretch of U.S. Highway 101, the link connecting Ventura and Santa Barbara, looked like a muddy river and was expected to be closed for 2 days. 2 Santa Barbara boating companies launched emergency ferry services to help with travel due to the affected roadways. The Island Packers and Condor Express will offer service in the morning and afternoon for $32. The worst of the rainfall occurred in a 15-minute span starting at 3:30 a.m. Large boulders were washed out of a previously dry creek bed and scattered across the road. The number of fatalities surpassed the death toll from a California mudslide on January 10, 2005, when 10 people were killed as a hillside gave way in the town of La Conchita, less than 20 miles south of the latest disaster. Montecito is beneath the scar left by a wildfire that erupted on December 4 and became the largest ever recorded in California. It spread over more than 440 square miles and destroyed 1,063 homes and other structures. It continues to smolder deep in the wilderness. The fire burned away grass and shrubs that hold the soil in place and also baked a waxy layer into the earth that prevents water from sinking deeply into the ground. A years-long drought eased in the state last spring, but Northern California had a dry start to winter and hardly any measurable rain fell in the south over the past 6 months. The extremely dry conditions and high winds last year led to some of the most destructive blazes on both ends of the state. The storm walloped much of the state with damaging winds and thunderstorms. Downtown San Francisco got a record 3.15 inches of rain on Monday, smashing the old mark of 2.36 inches set in 1872.